Welcome to the Safety and Risk Success podcast with me, Christian Harris. My guest today is Gary Wong, who is really fascinated by the topic of complexity. And he read our State of Safety survey report recently and picked out a couple of key themes he was keen to talk about, and particularly was how to overcome the resistance to change, because that was mentioned as a key blocker for safety professionals. So in this conversation, we're going to deep dive into that, and Gary's going to share some interesting, new, innovative approaches to trying to overcome change resistance, which I'm sure you'll benefit from. Do check out the resources that Gary shares. Do give him a follow on LinkedIn as well. And as always, if we've earned it from the podcast, give us a like and a share and a subscribe and all of that jazz. Hope you enjoyed this episode with myself and Gary Wong. Cheers.
Welcome to the Safety and Risk Success podcast with Christian Harris. We believe that proactive safety and risk management powers business performance. Each week we explore this theme, sharing guests, stories, insights, trends, hints and tips. You can find us on all the major podcasting platforms, and video versions are available on YouTube. But for now, let's join the conversation with Christian.
Thanks for joining me today, Gary.
Well, thanks for inviting me, Christian. It's been waiting to be on your program for some time, because we certainly have a lot of common things that we can talk about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. And I really appreciated you. The context was you reaching out and having read the State of Safety report and had some thoughts on that. So, yeah, very much appreciate you for suggesting that.
Right. Okay. Well, when you talk about the report, what really caught my attention, and congrats on doing a really comprehensive report, but
Thank
it was
you.
the blockers and challenges list that really
Yeah.
caught my attention. And that number one, and it was mentioned too in your video about overcoming change resistance, and we need to do a program about that. So that's what inspired me to go, like, I need to talk to Christian, and because I think I have some different ideas
Yeah.
on how we can overcome resistance. So I want to share them with you and the audience. Who knows, maybe down the road we can explore this a bit further. So consider this to be a bit of an introduction of what I'm going to do. Then we can take it later from there.
Yeah. Yeah. No, perfect. Yeah. I mean, I think, I don't know about you, I wasn't surprised to see that as coming up as a big challenge, because I think that particularly in the world of people don't like to change generally. But I think particularly if you've got the word safety in front of something, there is a resistance to, oh, it's the health and safety police or health and safety gone mad or
Yeah.
or whatever. So I do think it's a really valuable topic for us to start to dig into.
Yeah, and I think when I dig into it, at the same time, I'm going, oh, wow, I can also talk a bit about competing priorities,
Yeah.
essentially where to focus priorities, particularly in today's environment where things are already always moving and changing. How do you kind of like focus on a particular strategy
Yeah.
where it allows that sort of variance to take place there and still stay on track?
Yeah.
And the third one is that senior sponsorship need. And we hear it all the time. And when you talk to seniors, they know it. Senior leaders, yeah, I got to get onto fuel. I got to do this. But it's really difficult for them to do. So
Mm.
I need to kind of help them out there. How do we help them become more visible, show that they are committed and accountable? Yet they have a job to do as well, which is looking outside the company, and all these externalities are hitting the firm. Because if they focus in, who's looking out?
Yeah.
So we need them in their senior sponsorship roles, but let's try to make it easy for them as well.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, lots and lots to cover in this topic. So we won't be doing we can't go into every last detail today, but let's try and get some thought-provoking ideas out there and think about some different ways of approaching this. And in that regard, actually, something that someone mentioned on the webinar we did on the State of Safety report was thinking about some different perspectives and different frameworks, and they had some
Yeah.
thoughts on that, Gary.
Yeah, I do. And so one of the perspectives I bring is what we call sense making. So my practice is about sense making. Sense making essentially is making sense of the real world and then acting on it. We have this tendency, Christian, I see that when we have an issue, we tend to seek out consultants or other safety professionals who are all deeply immersed in safety. I
Mhm.
sometimes feel it's like we circle the wagons and then we look inward. I think what we need to do is maybe look out. And when we do look out, where should we look? So this approach, which we call disciplinarity, means that we can learn from other bodies of knowledge. So as you can see in my little Venn diagram, this is combining things from natural sciences. What have we learned from biology, from chemistry, from physics? Then, of course, there's complexity science, which is fairly new when you compare it to the other classical sciences. And this is a science of uncertainty and emergence. Then there's cognitive neuroscience. What is brain research telling us? And there's a lot of really interesting things that we're learning more about our brain. And I know for me, I had a lot of now myths. Back then, they looked like they're truths, but now we've discovered they're myths. So I've had to shift some of my thinking about how the brain actually works.
Yeah,
And the last science is social science, and this is the social science of anthropology, specifically the field of ethnography and storytelling. So this approach isn't my sole creation.
yeah,
It's a collaboration around the world led by Dave Snowden. Now, if you know Dave, Dave is well known for the co-creator of the Cynefin framework, SenseMaker software, which I'll talk quite a bit about today, and this whole new approach, anthropocomplexity. So
yeah,
safety is just one of many sense-making applications.
yeah. Okay. So anthropocomplexity, tell us what is that exactly?
Yeah, okay. Complexity, it's a blending of concepts from the sciences, which led to the emergence of three thoughts. Now, so here's my three thoughts, which I want to really talk about, and I'll keep on coming back to these. So number one is the brain is designed to recognize patterns.
Yeah,
Number two is let's make it attractive and easy for people to change. And the third one is this thing called affordance. And what we want to do is focus on affordance and system constraints.
okay. And affordance means kind of that it's relatively straightforward to do. There's no
Yeah,
cost,
yeah,
there's no sort of um, excessive cost either in time or effort or money or whatever it might be.
yeah. It's also it's a psychological term,
Okay.
and it really talks about the environment.
Right.
What does the environment afford? What does it offer you? So if you could look at a situation where, oh, I'd love to grow really nice leafy green plants, but you live in a desert,
Yeah.
that's going to be difficult because the desert doesn't afford you the
Hmm.
environment to grow nice green leafy plants unless you bring your own water and your own sort of nutrients and everything else. So that's what we want to focus on. Affordance also is used in safety by design, and I'll talk a little later about that.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a firm believer of the environment being really important in our world. I mean, I stole a phrase called "environment dictates performance," and that was about someone building a business and sort of
Yeah,
saying, if you want to build a successful business, you need to put yourself into environments with people you can learn from and be inspired by, and so on and so forth.
yeah,
But I think it really applies very much to what we want to achieve in safety as well, both from the sort of culture perspective, but also the kind of physical environment as well. As you say, if you're in a desert, you can't grow these leafy plants as easily. If you're in a building and that's the physical safety controls are really poor, it's hard for you to keep safe.
yeah, yeah, you got it. And one of the things I'm dealing with now is something called SEPTED, which is really looking how the environment affords safety to emerge. And we're looking at the design of buildings. We're looking at the design of the vegetation around that, the plants, the walls. How do all these things afford safety to occur so
Yeah.
they're not dangerous? So it's all about when you design a building, infrastructure, how do you avoid having dark alleys that people have to walk down? Because that invites danger to emerge.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, just on that, we could speak for hours, just on
Oh,
that, couldn't we, I suppose? But I mean, we want to try and stick to kind of what we were thinking we would cover. So how would you sort of suggest that we delve into these insights a bit more? What have we got any more frameworks to work
yeah.
through that would help us?
Yeah, so I suggest that what we do is that we start with the slide that Todd Conklin delivered a fair number of years ago now. And this is his journey of safety slide. And what it points out, and it is more of an illustration, but over the years, we've made a lot of progress in reducing injuries.
Yeah.
What we've done is we focused on compliance many, many years ago, and we looked at the turn of the century. That's when it all started off with the age of technology, as we call it. But then by the mid-century, we shifted to how we design things better. Safety by design, we looked at safety processes, and of course, we brought in technology.
Mhm.
So now we're down to the very end, 25 years later into the 21st century. But people are still getting hurt,
Yeah.
still dying. I characterize this as, we're trying to squeeze that last bit of toothpaste out of the tube, and it's really, really difficult. And I know that a lot of safety professionals, consultants are for sure trying different ideas.
Yeah.
I talked to a lot of them when I had my Meet the Author show on Safeopedia. Just last week, I was on the virtual conference for Safety on the Edge,
Yeah.
met some other authors, listened to their presentations. We're all trying different ideas, just looking for how do we squeeze that last bit of toothpaste out here.
Yeah.
Now, in that last bit, we talked a bit about the new view. So really, we're not looking at individuals anymore, but we're looking at system conditions in the organization. We're looking, as you said, Christian, we're looking at the environment more and what it affords.
Hmm.
Well, one another interesting slide is Eric Hallnagel's timeline chart. Now, I had the privilege of meeting Eric back in 2012 when he came to Vancouver, and he conducted a week-long seminar. He spoke about the evolution of safety thinking at that time, and it really mirrors business thinking. His slide divided into ages, technology, human factors, safety management. And that's where I got introduced to safety one, which is what's going wrong, and safety two, what's going right.
Mhm.
What I've done since then, I and a colleague, we extended Eric's timeline to include what we call the age of cognitive complexity. In this 21st century age, people are treated as natural storytellers, and safety is an emergent property of a complex adaptive system.
Mhm.
So together, they form anthropocomplexity, which we call a science of human complex systems.
Yeah. Yeah. And lots of people have brought up storytelling on the podcast before. Um, Steve Harris was talking about it for influence. Greg Smith, really interesting episode about how do you prove safety, but not focusing on numbers, among others. So I think storytelling definitely. There seems to be the soft skills in safety seem to be coming more and more to the forefront, and people that are, doing webinars, podcasts, books,
Yeah,
articles, that's kind of what they're speaking more and more about now, isn't it? These soft skills and the storytelling side of things.
yeah, yeah. So what I like to do is kind of like make 2 points for clarification. This first point is that when I talk about stories, or the other word is a narrative, and I'll get into that, stories not for marketing or management try to sell something, an idealistic future state, because that you'll see there's a lot of material on how do we communicate forward, how do we sell a land of milk and honey? I know, we'll create a
Yeah.
story of what that looks like, and then people can get that idea, they can move towards that. No, we're talking about stories as experiences. So these are things that people have seen happen to them personally, or maybe they saw, or maybe they heard about, and they talk about these things as stories. The other point I want to make is that sometimes there's confusion between what's the story and what's the narrative.
Mhm.
I just quickly created this slide to answer that question. What's the difference? Well, they are used interchangeably, but they are different. A story is made up of events that happened. A narrative is the order in which events are told. So if you shuffle the order, it creates a new narrative of the same story.
Mhm.
Narrative turns a story into information and how the recipient perceives what happened. So when you think about it that way, Christian, this whole idea that we're seeking and looking for the one truth or the one root cause in some cases here is probably not realistic, since a story can be told in many different ways. How
Yeah.
I saw an accident, vehicle accident at the intersection may be different than how you saw that because you were standing somewhere different.
Mm.
Or maybe I came in 10 minutes after and you were there right when it occurred. I have a different story that I would share. Now, are these right or wrong? No, well, we just say that everybody's got a different perspective on the story, on the event that took place.
Yeah.
Right. So how do we use stories? Well, this is what we try to do. We use stories as narrative data. We know that humans are natural storytellers, and we get that from ethnography. And what have we learned from ethnographers as they go out there and collect stories from different communities, tribes, organizations? Now, as natural storytellers, we just love telling narratives at work, at home, or with the family. That's how we share knowledge from generation to generation. It's what your great grandfather did before he came over on the boat in some cases. It's also hearing all about those family or tribal traditions, rituals, taboos. And over time, these form patterns, hidden structures that afford identity. How a team plays the game, how a company deals with a crisis, how a country is perceived globally. Now, as I mentioned in the first one, the brain is designed to recognize patterns.
Mhm.
Now, if you've read Daniel Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow, this is thinking fast. In cognitive neuroscience, it's called autonomic and novelty receptive processing. When you recognize a face in a crowd or recall a tune you've heard before, your brain is relying on stored patterns to quickly respond. When we solve a problem, the brain performs first fit pattern matching. It checks for, hey, I've done this before, experiences. It kind of goes through what I call the Rolodex in your mind very quickly, pulls out, oh, this looks what happened. And this is what I did before, so I'll do it again. And we call these things heuristics, if we're going to use that word. And we could talk for a long time about what's good and bad about that. But all that we're saying is that's what the brain does. It performs first fit pattern matching. Right? Now, the second thing is about, we're hearing more and more about the desire to make data-driven decisions.
Yeah.
And some of those sites I go on, and when I do some IT stuff, it's all about data, data, data. And that's okay. No problem with that. Perspective I want to talk about is looking at narrative data. So Tricia Wang, who's an ethnographer, she coined the term thick data. Thick data is narrative data. Well, we all know what big data is. That's the enterprise-wide IT systems sort of stuff that's providing. So they gave us really good data on who, when, what, how long. But as Trish says, they don't answer the why question.
Yeah.
Why did the person put his hand in the saw and get hurt? So what we want to do is to be able to collect both big and thick data to make sense of the current situation.
Yeah. Which makes perfect sense, doesn't it? Because that why is so important. I mean, if you're in a court of law, maybe the why is less important. But if you want to be trying to learn lessons and prevent, then it's crucial. You can't really make any decisions without understanding that why.
Yeah. And and it's led to some methods, and I think you probably heard it, the five whys method.
Yeah.
If you just keep on asking why,
My
already
young kids have the 27 whys method.
exactly, that's it. So we're trying to make sense of the situation. And by asking the why question, we can probably make better sense of it. But having said that, we need the context of big data as well to
Yeah,
really get the bigger picture.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah. So how would you sort of go about collecting this thick data? How easy is it to collect thick data in an organization?
Yeah, okay, let's talk a bit about that. So what happens is that thick data actually is being shared all the time. Just
Mm.
think of coffee and lunchroom breaks. These
Yep,
are times when we shoot the breeze, and that's we're sharing thick data. Now, thick data aren't 2 hour Hollywood sort of stories. There's these little what we call narrative fragments, little pieces, maybe 30 seconds long. It
yeah,
could be like, did you see the goal that the football player scored yesterday's game?
yeah,
Something short like that. Um, Monthly safety meetings, a lot of thick data there, but these occasions rarely record the thick data being heard.
mm,
And we see that in the meeting minutes because typically the meeting minutes will document the outcomes like after discussion, decision was made or agreed to, and yada, yada, yada. But it's after discussion. What we're talking about, what was the discussion? That's the thick data.
yeah,
Now, that's the very simple thing. Now, some organizations collect thick data because they run what we call sense-making workshops. So here's just some slides of a workshop that I did with some young engineers. In this workshop, I broke the group into small tables. The storyteller at each table would share their narrative, then write on a post-it note a meaning behind the story. Essentially, why did you tell this story in a few words? We then moved the participants around. We combined tables to search for patterns
yeah,
and trying to extract key themes. And once we got those key themes, then we posted them on what we call a Cynefin framework. Now, won't have a lot of time to talk about the Cynefin framework, but just consider this a way of looking at information being posted and whether it's something that's really easy to do, more complicated, or maybe more complex. But the
yeah,
whole idea of doing this is that we can create action plans. Because as I said at the beginning, sense making is about making sense of the real world in order to act in it. And that second part is really important because too often we can have these wonderful conversations, make sense of the world, and then we leave and we don't do anything with that.
yeah,
We need action plans so we can do something about it. Now, if an organization runs a lot of workshops, it can collect a lot of useful, thick data. But obviously, it's going to take a lot of time, effort, and money. And maybe a lot of organizations will just say we'd love to, but we can't really do that. Or they space them so far apart, you really cannot see the patterns across many, many workshops. So
yeah,
fortunately, again, we can take advantage of the tools that we have, particularly the digital tools. There are faster, better, and cheaper ways to gather and analyze thick data.
yeah. Three great words that everybody wants to hear: faster, better, cheaper. Because that's the obvious challenge, isn't it? To
Yeah,
thinking about this. as you say, this thick data is everywhere, but actually the acquisition of it, the collection of it, the maintenance of it, sounds pretty overwhelming. So how can we do that faster, better, cheaper? Is it data analytics? Is it apps? How do we do that?
Yeah, okay. So obviously we're talking about leveraging the internet, and in many cases, the smart devices that people are carrying with them. And for each organization, the context could be different. It could be smart devices that the organization provides, or it could be bring your own device, and then we'll put some apps on there that you can use.
Yeah.
So it kind of varies. I don't think there's any one policy that fits all. It just varies for the organization.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that we do is that we try to analyze data. And the key point here is that narratives are in complexity science the lowest levels of coherent granularity. So
Right.
let me repeat that. That was a mouthful. So the lowest level of coherent granularity. Now, granularity is an interesting word, but it really strikes to the heart of how do we solve problems. Because if I were to say or ask your kids, okay, what's a big problem that we should solve? If they say world peace, we'd be going like, okay, but I don't know what we can do in our little family to help resolve world peace. Can you bring it down to another level, a lower level of granularity? Well, how about we look at what we can do in our city? Can you get lower down? How about what we can do in our neighborhood? Oh, it's getting better. But then if they kind of get to like, well, why don't we do something in our family?
Yeah.
Right? Like there's a couple of broken things that we need to fix. Like we got leaky water faucets. Can we fix those things? Yes, we can, right? That's the lowest level. Then you may go like, can you tell a story? Yes. Well, that leaky faucet means that we're wasting energy, which is not good, Dad. Or I find that the drip, drip, drip drives me nuts at nighttime, Dad. Right? So, Dad, what are you going to do about it? Right? Oh, I can do something about it. Those stories are at the lowest level. They stand alone and they do make sense.
Yeah.
And what's nice about stories, if you can get down to the narrative level, these are scalable. So it really doesn't matter if you're a small company or a huge multi-country enterprise, narratives stand alone and they're scalable. So we can think of Lego bricks, which is the smallest brick. That smallest brick is a narrative.
Yeah.
If you take a brick and combine it with other small bricks, we get what we call an assembly or a module. Now we can take the same brick and we can recombine it, take it apart, put it together, and we can create a different module. So these commonly used modules or assemblies are called patterns.
Right.
And if you ever look at these Lego brick masters, this is the language they talk about, assemblies and different patterns. They take a whole assembly. This is how we can actually make this mechanical motion, rotational motion here, and they actually have a module made up of small little pieces and parts, right?
Nice. Yeah.
So Lego builders will often use these standardized patterns to create efficient, repeatable designs. So now you can see what we get into faster, better, and probably cheaper. We're not
Yeah.
wasting anything. They've
Mm.
worked it over. What is the best pattern we can use? Now we can do the same thing with storytelling in an organization. This is Dave Snowden's Sensemaker process, and it follows complex design principles. So I just want to make something very clear. I am not an employee of the Cynefin company, and I'm also not in any promotional fee scheme, too
Yeah. Yeah.
bad, but I'm not. I'm just one of many Sensemaker practitioners around the world, and I'm just using Sensemaker software and process to just make sense of safety.
Yeah.
So let's just break down this a bit. If you look at this, you start with the narrative, and you can, at the collection phase, where the experience is recorded. And I just blow this up a bit, you can see that. We can get storytellers to record their experiences as written entries, voice recordings, photos, and you can do that on your desktop with your iPhone or your Android smart device in the field. Now, what I'm telling you about is a practice that's been used for over 10 years. So it's been used with senior citizens in Singapore, because Singapore is very interested in hearing the experience of senior citizens.
Yeah.
Instead of interviewing, they actually have a little app on their phone, and they can actually record an experience they just had. It's been used in the US military, and obviously used in field as well as office workers. So you start with a narrative collection phase where an experience is recorded. And then what we find out is that it's faster because entries can be made anytime, anywhere, by anyone. Now, these, as I mentioned, entries are deliberately kept short.
Yeah.
They shouldn't take more than 5 or 8 minutes max. And the reason why we say that is that we want to really help storytellers say, okay, we want to make it easy. We don't want these long things. Make it really, really short. Again, narrative fragments, something that just quickly happened, just explain it. And the aim is all about to quickly alert decision makers about emerging danger as well as serendipitous opportunities. So if somebody wants to write about, I don't like how we are how this crane is operating, you don't want a guy write an hour's report. You want like a 2-minute quick bang.
Yeah.
Tell us about that now so we can do something about it quickly. So that's where faster is really important.
Mm-hmm.
When you enter these entries, they're captured in real time. So we're talking real time, or not a week later, but we're in real time. Now, it's better because we don't put any constraints on what the storytellers may enter. Some of the other software, and I've noticed, and I do try to keep aware of what other sort of data collection offerings are out there.
Yeah.
A lot of them are you kind of have a whole bunch of check boxes that you tick off to see this is your story. We don't do that. For one thing, how do you know that you can cover in 48 tick boxes, check box, what's happened? And that's a big struggle in itself. So we don't have that constraint. We just say if something directly happened to you, you observed it firsthand, you heard it through the grapevine, enter it. It could be physical. It could be a mental health experience. And, I think we're talking now, Christian, about how emotional and mental health is all becoming part of safety now. It's not just physical. But, it also could be something involving artificial intelligence, AI, automation. Heck, we can collect things on climate change. But what's also good is that we can collect some positive story. So if a safety 2 event occurred, we can capture that. There's a nice way of capturing it. So it's always not about the negative, but it can be about the positive. Essentially, we're allowing people to act as human sensors, or what we call weak signal detectors. That's because as humans, we can sense things such as, oh, I don't like that.
Yeah.
That looks like an accident ready to happen. I don't think we should be doing that. Or if you're a Star Wars fan, I got a bad feeling about this, all those sort of things. These are proactive narratives. Much better to hearing reactive stories told such as, gosh, if they had asked me, I would have told them not to do that.
Yeah.
Or if you're a witness during an accident investigation, why don't they listen to me?
Yeah.
Whereas one general manager expressed to me, why am I always the last person to find out?
Mm.
These stories are being shared. Yeah. And, sometimes you just don't get to hear them. So we've got to find a way, again, which we'll do in the software, how can a general manager find out at the same time as everybody else is when the story is posted in real time?
Yeah.
This is where it's a bit different in typical things. Other story data collection software, we do something called signification. What this means that storytellers, get to interpret how they see the story. We have these signifiers, as you can see in on the iPhone screen. Signifiers capture how they feel about the situation and thus provide a sense of attitude at the time. This also means that no one else can misinterpret their perceptions. And I've been guilty of this where I will take some data, some stuff, and I will analyze it, and I will add my filtered lens through that.
Yeah.
This is me doing my first fit pattern matching, go like, oh, I've seen this before. I've experienced that. Well, what a bunch of crockett. Just because Gary experienced it doesn't mean that this person's experience is the same. Back then, I didn't realize that what I was doing. Self-interpretation is a complex design principle, and it's called disintermediation, which really means there's a direct pipeline between storyteller and decision maker with no one in between to mess things up.
Yeah. No whispers and changes of stories and things.
Yeah, and how often that will happen, right? Yeah. Maybe we soften the story here because we don't want really to have this as an incident to report it against our KPIs, that sort of stuff. What the storyteller reports is what everybody reads. And that's what we call, in some cases, authenticity. There's no mucking around with that. Now, what Sensemaker does is that it immediately converts the qualitative signifier data into quantitative data in real time. So this is a bit of IP that Dave has that he built into the software itself. Then he uses data visualization tools, which automatically generate different charts. So here's a typical chart, which we have. This is from, I have a demo called Safety Pulse, which we can talk about later. People can go and access, they can kick the tires on it, see what it's like. Essentially, this at-a-glance dashboard is a quick look at your current status. And we use familiar bar and pie charts and histograms. And essentially, the questions that you would ask if you saw this is there something that needs my attention right now? Then if you see something that really strikes you, then you can take proactive prevention action about that. So this is why it's better. Now, some people will say, well, is this expensive? Well, no, it's actually quite cheap. Well, inexpensive. Cheap's not a good word. Let's say inexpensive.
Inexpensive, yeah.
Inexpensive, right? So let's contrast that to the cost of a traditional survey. And I've done surveys before where you got to design an instrument, then you got to collect the data, then you got to analyze, then you got to report. And typically that could run you almost like a month, 2 months even. Then all that you get really is a snapshot in time when that person decided to fill out and respond to your survey. And that could vary in a 2-month period. It's not continuous. So when I looked at, well, let me ask you, when I looked at the quality of your status of siege report, I'm assuming that that wasn't cheap to produce or inexpensive to produce.
No, certainly not. No, a lot of time and effort went into it, exactly.
Yeah, right. So again, not to kind of discount the value of that. It's still valuable stuff. It's just a matter of, do you want something that's a little faster, better, and cheaper? Okay.
Yep.
Now, I also say cheaper because there is no software installation. And this always makes the IT security people really happy. No, we're not going to install some app on everybody's phone or device or on the enterprise. No, everything is essentially in the cloud.
Yeah.
And it is cheaper because there's no paperwork involved. Everything is digital.
Nice, nice. Some companies, though, I'm sure still would prefer to have things on paper and PowerPoint presentations and things like that. That must be a challenge.
Yeah, and I understand that. And I don't immediately try to say get rid of all that sort of stuff. No, you always start with what people have. And I
Yeah.
would go into a company and just ask them, can you show me what sort of reports that you get now? And invariably, the paper printed reports come out and the PowerPoint presentations. So at least I have an understanding where they're coming from.
Yeah.
Now, what I do is say, okay, SenseMaker, if you introduce this tool into your organization, you have the capability to capture images like these bar charts, everything else, and you can insert them into your presentations if you want. You can also export narratives, all those stories, and you can include that in some sort of summary report. So for all those people that want that data, it's available. You can spin it out, export it really easily. But I do remember reading in that status of safety report, safety professionals are challenged communicating safety in a way that resonates with decision makers.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could do some conventional reporting at an exec or top management meeting, and I've done that. But let's be honest, slides and reports are not really exciting and generally focus on the past, right? So it's like, okay, Gary, you're up there, you got 5 minutes, run through my stuff, now get out of here, right? And then you go like, what did I just do? Did I really move the needle, or am I just probably freezing the needle in place more, right?
Yeah.
So I'm also not suggesting that people have to take training in business acumen and strategic communication. You could, but I'm suggesting that, hey, you already know how to communicate. You're a natural storyteller. So we're not talking about communicating boring big data. We're
No.
talking about really exciting thick data. So there is no real canned presentation when you show thick data here. And of
Yeah.
course, this is high on the list of the blocks and challengers, this lack of senior sponsorship,
Mm.
need for visible leadership, commitment, accountability. So let me ask the counter to that, which is, how about we make it attractive and easy for senior sponsors to change?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to propose we do this. So let's do this. Instead of your next meeting, and I don't know how many of the viewers have this opportunity, but if you do get to present in front of your group, instead of passing out PowerPoints, showing slides, and passing out print reports, how about you bring up on a big screen the Sensemaker dashboard? Tell them this is a visual glance of our safety culture in near or real time. And then instead of you giving answers, which typically we would do, let's ask them 3 questions. Bring up, for example, the bar charts. What do you see that confirms your beliefs about safety? What do you find surprising? Or what makes you curious? And when you do that, somebody will say, well, why is that bar chart there so long? What's the context behind that? And we know that, and I've been caught in this in the past, where you do show a bar chart, and you say, "Sorry, that's the level of granularity that I can't go below that." Right? So I don't know what were that typically the comments or the opinions that made that person click, "This is bad" or something. That's
Yeah.
why the bar chart was so long. What we can do in Sensemaker is we can say, well, we sure can. And what we do is that we click on that specific bar and out pops the stories that were
Yeah.
entered. And they pop up and they can read them. Now, I do have some caution if you plan to do this. Don't do this too quickly. I would say try to keep the decision makers a little higher up there, because there is this
Mm.
desire to go down deeply into the stuff and get messed up. The caution that I have is that quite often they're looking to answer the who question. Who said this? Who did that? And really, we don't want to go there. We don't want to focus on individuals. And in many cases, the stories, anyways, are anonymous, so they wouldn't have that. But they're looking who said that. Well, don't give them that opportunity. Keep it higher. And if they want to read some of the stories, we can just give them just the narrative itself.
Yeah.
Realize that, okay, the reason why this bar is so long is because we seem to have a forklift problem here. That's what you want to focus into. Oh, something that's in the environment. It's a piece of machinery. Okay, let's look at that. Right? But quite often when you go through that, they'll just look at it and go like, oh, we don't like these stories. Oh, we like these ones. These are much more desirable. What we're doing is that this is disintermediation at its finest. This is this frontline worker. And by the way, it doesn't have to be a frontline worker. It could be a first line supervisor, anybody in the organization that can share a story, because we all have stories. This is disintermediation at its finest because it's a direct pipeline to the decision makers. They have the opportunity to read the story that you entered. So now they are curious. And the whole key about this thing, Christian, is about raising the level of curiosity. We're not going to solve safety problems here. This is the starting point. But now if we get their curiosity, that now says we have places that we can look at where we can actually make a difference. So action comes from asking a very different change intervention question now. How might we get fewer undesirable and maybe more favorable stories? So after that, people start thinking, go like, well, yeah, we if we did this, so they start having those small conversations about, now they're curious. You've got their attention. Yeah. So you really kind of like succeeded in an objective in trying to engage them more. Well, having to say, I'm going to engage you more, you just do it. And all of a sudden they get more excited, more interested. And you also tell them too that, as new entries are being made, these charts that you see, they're going to dynamically change in real time. Mm-hmm. You can also, for the ones that are really excited, hey, if you want to have access to this dashboard, we'll give you this link. And you can click on there and you can look at that link, look at all the stories as much as you want. Now, but instead of doing that, because again, I think we want them to don't overly focus inside, but keep looking outside. We can say, you know what? I think we can establish a new process, a new way of talking about safety. So instead of attending your regular meetings, let them know we can establish a cadence and invite them to your regular meetings where you're looking at the data at certain times here. And this is a different communication paradigm. And if you like, for me, it's a safety differently sort of opportunity.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, it all makes good logical sense, doesn't it? It's clever how it's all been pulled together. So yeah, definitely can see the value in this for sure.
Yeah.
Gary, if we go back to where we started with overcoming change resistance, how can we overcome that problem using narratives? How does that help us?
Okay, right. So, as you know, I have a different view on resistance, Christian. Resistance is a complexity science phenomenon. We call it feedback loops. And this is inspired by Gene Rocklin's book, Essential Friction, Error Control in Organizational Behavior. What Rocklin suggests is that friction or resistance is not an obstacle to progress, but rather it should be considered to be feedback that can validate or invalidate our assumptions and be used for correcting errors. His point is that resistance is not something that needs to be overcome, but rather it's an information that should be considered carefully as we plan our next step. So how can we make use of that? Well, one of the things that we have in the Sensemaker software, besides bar and pie charts, we can generate what we call landscape maps. These are two-dimensional XY contour maps. These maps become more helpful if you're on a safety journey, and I assume most companies would say they are. So you have a safety vision, statement, provides a sense of direction of where you want to go. Or maybe you have an articulated safety strategy. Or as we know, if you're traveling in a known territory, you should have a compass and a few maps. Oh, we have a compass. But what maps are people using for navigation? It could be a portfolio of safety projects, could be an annual safety program where we pick a topic every month. But I've also had people say to me, well, we really don't have maps. We just kind of wing it. Well, guess what? We have a faster, better, cheaper solution. Why don't you use the landscape maps in Sensemaker that can use for navigation? And the beauty about these maps is that they represent your safety culture, since they are generated by the everyday stories people are sharing with each other. So these maps visually tell you what's it like to work here and the relationships and interactions people are experiencing. So as a quick example, this particular map plots rules compliance versus getting the work done. Stories are displayed as dots, and the contour lines are automatically drawn, and clusters appear when many stories are similarly signified. Clusters of unfavorable stories are easy to identify. That's kind of like where the red X is. Well, we want fewer of these where work isn't getting done or rules are being broken. And you can also click on some of those dots and you can read the narratives, which may review where the resistance and friction actually exist. Now, on the other hand, favorable stories are experiences where work is getting done while adhering to the rules. That's where the green check mark is. Well, we want more of these. So how do we influence people to move from unfavorable stories to unfavorable stories? This is where we apply that second insight. We try to make it attractive and easy for people to change. We ask, what system constraints might we change? Going back to affordance and system constraints. Who in your organization has an answer? Well, I know if you're having those conversations with the decision makers, they have their ideas, but you've also got other internal experts, analysts. You got external consultants if you use them.
Yeah.
But we believe it's all of the above, but it's also the workers in the network. That's why we ask these storytellers this question in the Sensemaker Collector. And more often than not, the solutions leaders seek, they reside within the people in the organization. Why? Because they know the work. Managers and supervisors who listen to workers doing what we call Gemba walks are aware of this. So Gemba is that Japanese lean term for management walking around. So when asked, what should we do? You'll hear something like, we can change Rule 42. That's a constraint hindering us. Oh. Or you can have a constraint that could be an enabling. Well, if we restricted our two options down to two, that would allow us to safely work faster. When you think about best practices, Christian, best practices are an enabling constraint because they simplify decision making. Instead of allowing many different ways, there's only one way that we want people to do this. That's a best practice.
Yeah.
So we're using it all the time. Now, the other situation you may have is this one, where people in that bottom left pink area who are not getting a job done and not complying with rules, we ask them, can you read what these people in the green are successfully doing? Can you do that? You may get back, well, that's too much a leap for us. Well, could you head to the yellow area? Let's see about that. Yeah, we can do that if you change a couple of rules. Sure, I believe we can do that. So the yellow area is what we call in complexity science the adjacent possible. The adjacent possible is attractive and easier for people to head towards.
Yeah.
So this is a complex design principle of distributed cognition. This is using the collective brains and understanding and thinking of the people in your organization. It also touches upon psychological safety. Because if I can borrow Timothy Clark's 4 stages, gathering narratives objectives affords people to feel included, feel safe to learn, feel it's safe to contribute, and feel safe to challenge the status quo. Like, yeah, I think we don't need Rule 42. I could challenge that so that we can move towards that adjacent possible.
Mm.
And what I like best about this is that we're not talking about the who.
No.
We're not talking about blaming people. We're not talking about behaviors. I'm not a clinical psychologist, so I always get very nervous when we talk about changing somebody's behavior. I really don't know how to do that. But what I can do is I can talk about things that we can actually change, such as systemic conditions and constraints like policies, standards, and rules. These are human imposed things that are enabling safety and even danger to emerge. So this is how you can overcome change resistance. It's not about changing resistance. We just want to make it easier for people to go where we want them to go.
Yeah.
Now, people familiar with behavioral science, they'll see a connection with nudging. So nudging is really helping people move towards an adjacent possible. And it's also supported by cognitive neuroscience. So as we said, the brain is designed to be efficient, in other words, freaking lazy, and it wants to use the least amount of energy possible. So thinking fast and heuristics, these are mental shortcuts, rules of thumb you have developed over time for patterns. So it all seems to kind of fit together.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, definitely makes a lot of sense. A lot of sense. So one of the other things, Gary, that that was mentioned in the list of blockers was competing priorities. Can this anthro-complexity approach address competing priorities as well?
Yeah, we can, because we can use the same narrative database, Christian, to inform decision makers. They now have thick data for a better picture.
Yeah.
So another XY plot that we can do is what we call an affordance map. And as we already talked about later, affordance is used in our world of safety by design. Mapping affordances clarifies what devices can do and helps to prevent accidents by making the correct actions obvious, reducing the likelihood of user error.
Right.
So we can use that same thinking when picking priorities during times of uncertainty. You find out where you are in the current present, then what is possible before you leap into setting priorities that have little chance of succeeding. Now, an affordance map is simply an energy time grid. I'm going to put one up here. Again, because of time constraints, this may look a little busy, so I will break it down for you. You can see it's that 2D, it's an XY plot where we have time and we also have human energy. That's the two axes. We also call this, Dave also calls this the Estrian framework. So Estrian mapping is a process to create this ET grid. Now, he created this to counter the traditional strategic planning where strategy is seen as a one-way linear flow directly forward, and we can create linear blueprints on that. And my God, I did that for years, and I didn't realize what I was doing. Now he's suggesting that this flow can be two-way, like the tides of an estuary. Flow can also be oblique to get around and circumvent a barrier. And now, if you look at this world of economics, flow can be circular, like the circular economy model. It's not always about growth. We must have growth, and it must be always keep on getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And what has that done to our world in terms of affecting the environment and causing other things to occur that are not very helpful? So circular economy is something interesting. It just tells you that flow can be different. Now, just quickly what we would do in a affordance mapping session, this typically would be an in-person priorities workshop. Yeah. We identify what are the key issues that require changing. Participants think about that in terms of affordance. And then for each issue, what opportunities are provided or inhibited by the ecosystem. Then we position them on the map. Now, in some cases, if you want, you can actually collect all this data in advance by asking the question in an online narrative collector here.
Hmm.
The upside of that, of course, is that instead of just having a selected few people develop this map, we can engage more people that aren't there in person, but they have contributed. So this is, again, back to this idea of distributed cognition, taking
Yeah.
advantage of anybody that wants to contribute the opportunity to do so. Now, from that, you can also have the same situation where you can look at clusters. A cluster may be a key issue. It may not. You need to have those conversations. But what's important that leaders are making informed decisions on setting priorities.
Hmm.
And they can think of these affordance maps and landscape maps in terms of terrain with hills and flat plains and mountains. So if you have a leader that says, we need to go for this particular issue or initiative here, we may realize that, hey, that's going to require a high level of energy.
Yeah.
And that's like akin to climbing over a huge mountain to reach the other side. Do we really want to do that? Or maybe we need to, instead of climbing directly over the mountain, we're going to get a lot of resistance with that. Maybe the wiser move may be to flow around and travel obliquely. It may take a little longer, but it's going to be more attractive and easier for people to achieve. Again, this is about looking at adjacent possibles to move from fewer unfavorable to more favorable steps. So if you do that step towards adjacent possible, often you can call this is just a quick win.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's easy to get to it, less energy and time required. And then as soon as you get to that adjacent possible and you collect more data, that map may dynamically change anyways. So a whole different set of opportunities and maybe threats emerge from that.
Hmm.
So this is this concept of emergent strategy. We look at new affordances that emerge. This is not just impossible. Or maybe an easy path has emerged that gets us closer to the safety vision.
Hmm.
We just don't know. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's so powerful, isn't it? Because, especially in big organizations, people have these long-term strategies. And then, you have a change of management and the whole strategy flips, does a 180, and you're going off in a totally different direction. It's not dynamic enough, not fluid enough. This seems, really, 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 really powerful.
Yeah. If you just look back a few years ago when people were probably marching towards their vision strategies, and all of a sudden we got COVID.
Yeah.
What did that do to us? Right? So how resilient are you? If you have emergent strategy, you would find things that you could do to maneuver around, whatever, as opposed to like, oh, we're screwed now. What are we going to do? And then you become paralyzed. You don't want that.
Yeah. No, definitely. Gary, just conscious of time because we're kind of up to our hour that we were aiming for. Is there any last couple of things that you would like to address under this topic?
Yeah, I think cost always comes up, and there was a few comments in the report about safety technology, the paradox. People see value but struggle with upfront investment and internal justification. So there seems to be somewhat of a disconnect between belief and action. And there's no question. New technologies can be pricey and scary, especially requires a lot of training of humans to support it. The anthropo-complexity approach, we suggest it's the other way around. It's human thinking supported by technology. We already have human thinking, Christian. All of our workers can think and do really want to make good decisions. So we're really saying, well, how can we augment them with technology to make it easier? So Sensemaker itself is a technology, but it's not that expensive, you can say. In fact, we almost suggest that if you wasn't sure, you can do it yourself. This happens to be one of the products. This is called Sensemaker Pulses. It's essentially it's a template. It's a do-it-yourself product. And for 2,500 pounds, what the company will do is open up a database for you to collect your data for 3 months. So you can go and start collecting narratives. And what the template has already is predefined, well-tested signifiers. And then you get a bit of consulting time from them to show you how would you analyze the data that you get.
Yeah.
Then you can decide after 3 months whether you want to extend the trial period another 3 months or longer.
Yeah.
You may find that for 3 months, you get very few stories that are people willing to share. Well, that's telling you something about your psychological safety and why do people not afraid to share. Or you may get a ton of stories being shared. And if you try to take it away, people are going to get upset. You can't take that away from us. I think of the days back in the Sony Walkman days when Sony did that and put it up there. Nobody knew what it was, then try to take it away a month later. And you can't take that away from me.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
my Sony Walkman. Same sort of thinking there as well. Right?
Yeah.
So in some cases, I'm suggesting too is that the report mentioned bureaucracy and red tape as blockers of safe enhancement.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw something out there, which maybe sounds kind of like Gary, what you're saying. I'm going to say, forget the business case. Don't ask for permission. Ask for forgiveness. Start small. Start with one department headquarters. Show workers the dashboard and the opportunity to get in front of decision makers. Your entries can be anonymous. Some clients have their story charts there. I want to put my name on there because that's my story. I own that story. So you can do that as well, right?
Yeah.
So what we want to do is monitor the number of entries. Now, 200 is probably a good start in the dashboard. So it gives you enough data, you can do something with it. And then you also give feedback by communicating management actions taken, ideally for narratives require immediate attention. Then you show the dashboard to decision makers and do the same sort of stuff. Give them hands-on experience to play and raise their curiosity. And then tell them we're going to take it away and see what they say.
Love it. Love that approach. Definitely one to take away. So Gary, thank you so much for sharing all of this great insight today. If the audience would like to get a bit more information or learn a bit more, what can you recommend that they should do? And also, did you want to plug anything like your webinars, podcasts, anything like that? Feel free to plug away.
Yeah, okay, sure. So one of the things I did for this past year is that I'm on the safeopedia.com platform, and I did a series called The Certainty Of Show, where a lot of things that I talked about, we did in 1 hour presentations with guests. One of the guests that we had on was Andrew McKenzie, and in this particular episode, we actually did a live demo of the SenseMaker Pulse process. So if people can go there, look it up there and just watch that and see what with Andrew. If people are interested more about, or curious about what is this thing called affordance mapping, I did a little very quick introduction with Rosa Carrillo. Rosa wrote a book called OHS Voices from the Resistance. And we took her 6 recommendations and we did plot them on an affordance map just to see what it was like here. So it was just a taste, just the feeling of what it was like here. And I guess the last piece that, that's out there, yeah. So this is the affordance map that I did with your book.
Yeah.
Again, very simple sort of thing. And the last thing I wanted to share with the listeners and the audience is this is my website. My website's a little bit different. I got away with my static website because I could never keep it up to date and it was always getting old. So what I've done is that I'm using a piece of software called the Brain. And what you see in here is what's in my head, the good and the bad. And I decided to just share my thoughts out with the public. A lot of it, as you can see, is about complexity, anthropology. It's about safety as well and strategy. You can have a look at that. It's easy to get to. It's just my website, gswong.com. I'd love to hear something. And if you disagree or you find I got something incorrect, you can just direct message me on LinkedIn or send me an email, and I'm more than happy to correct things if I have to.
Yeah, and have a discussion. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah,
Great.
exactly.
Well, Gary, that was really, really interesting. Just lastly, wondered if you've got maybe three sort of key points, key takeaways to leave the audience with, and then we can wrap it up.
Yeah. Okay, sure. Yeah, so let me do that. Oops, let me just find out where they are. Here we go. There we go. Okay. So 3 points I would like to leave is change resistance is not a challenge to overcome, but a landscape to explore.
Yeah.
Resistance is valuable feedback from people who care about the organization and know what's at stake. Narrative maps are visual representations of the safety culture. So use them to discover system constraints that enable safety to emerge. And then you can also map the affordances to set priorities. And the last thing probably is you can't change the past and you can't predict the future. So you do what you can do, which is really manage the evolutionary potential of the present. So when we deal with complexity, Christian, we want to take one small, low cost, less risky step at a time towards a decent possible. Then we see what happens, and from that we learn and we adapt.
Perfect. That was great, Gary. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, thank you for inviting me to this. And if others, in your audience want to explore these things a little bit deeper, maybe in doing one of your roundtables, I'm happy to do that with them.
Fantastic.
Because I'm always like to learn from the fellows out there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's what it's all about. Great. Well, yeah, thanks, Gary. And thank you to you for joining Gary and I on this episode, and we will see you next week for another one. Cheers.
Thanks for joining us on the Safety and Risk Success podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please hit follow and do share on social media. Does anyone you know spring to mind as a great guest, even yourself? If so, please contact us on podcast@slipsafety.co.uk. See you next week for another episode.